Well, our good friend Bruce Hamilton recently brought us his latest article titled Doormats. Doormats, that's right, which we ran in Tuesday's issue of Quality Digest Daily. There it is. A little bit of a cryptic title, I think.
I'm not a doormat.
Without reading the kicker there. So who are these doormats? Publishers are generally considered to be doormats. Editors-in-chief? No. In this case, that's not what he's talking about. The doormats that Hamilton is speaking about here turn out to be design engineers. Imagine that. Now, that's not normally a class of employee that I would think of as being walked all over, but as Hamilton explains it in the piece, many organizations really don't do a very good job of optimizing the critically important design work that lean operations in particular demand. Of course, remember, Bruce is taking this from a lean perspective. He's looking at lean manufacturing, and when you look at it from that perspective, and as we'll explain here, you start to see why it's so important to have respect for your engineers and have the engineers understand what they need to do as part of the broader operation. So, the feeling that engendered this doormat designation can best be summed up by a quote that Hamilton offers in the piece early on. As he recalls, in his career, at the beginning of his career, he and his company were adopting lean and being trained by some high-profile consultants with experience in the Toyota production system. So one of Hamilton's engineers exclaimed during some of this training, well, when things go wrong, production just blames us, right? They always blame us. And actually, in truth, part of that feeling was driven by those Japanese consultants. They didn't have a particularly high respect in many cases for engineers, as Bruce indicates, and they didn't hide that contempt. Well, in truth, they didn't hide their contempt for lazy engineers, for lazy engineering that failed to take into account the realities of the production and assembly functions in their organization. See,
aforementioned silos.
The aforementioned silos. See, what you have to understand again, to get back to lean, from a lean perspective, waste, which is introduced into a process very early in the value stream, is really the worst waste of all because it causes cascading wastes further along the process. Having to redesign something at the assembly level represents a failure to properly plan, which falls directly, of course, at the feet of engineers. So now we start to understand why an engineer, especially one in an organization just beginning to embrace lean, might feel a little bit like a doormat, and maybe it's for a certain amount of cause, at least in certain situations, as Bruce describes. The next question, of course, is how those engineers can get off the floor. And see what I did there?
That's nice.
How those engineers can get off the floor and start adding value instead of waste to the processes that they're involved with. Hamilton has a couple of simple suggestions, I think, that address this nicely. One thing he says is that engineers have far too much work in process, far too much WIP. According to a study quoted by Hamilton here, the optimal number of projects that a design engineer should have going on at any one time is two. 2 projects at any one time. Yeah. That's not the reality in many of these organizations, as I understand from reading some of Bruce's work. Many organizations, designers typically have double, triple that amount of projects flying around them at any given time, which is obviously not good.
Software engineers as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Probably even more so.
Yeah, than that. Yeah. Another issue that arises comes from a typical engineering mindset. Most designers, no surprise there, they like to create their own new designs rather than work off of, and hopefully improve maybe, someone else's existing ones. Yet this attitude needlessly adds complexity and usually results in wasted time and or hastily prepared suboptimal designs delivered to production. I mean, you're building something that may be competitive with something that already exists, and you're not utilizing what's already there and improving it, because that's not as much fun as launching your own things. But that's really suboptimized in the process. And a related issue to this is the way that designers are generally housed within the organization. I mean, many times they're in cubicles and they're separated from one another, and that often suits the independent nature of the typical engineer, but it restricts the free flow of information and ideas. And one of the quotes we had in this article was, it also restricts the idea that not only is there free flow of idea between them, but between others in the organization, across all points of the organization. That's a key one too. So people with different viewpoints and perspectives and unique talents won't get together and lead to tighter designs. And the system in many organizations just isn't fostered to set up that kind of result. So the idea of engineers as doormats, I think, driven by the fact that design is an all too frequent source of tremendous waste, is really caused by these combinations of overarching system flaws and individual personality quirks and rather prevalent operational constraints too. Design engineers don't have to be the doormats of the lean world, but I think unless those factors are understood and they're overcome, it's inevitable that they're going to be. And you mentioned you've seen this too. You've seen this play out. Mm-hmm. You know the issues that engineering and poor engineering, lazy engineering can have in terms of interfacing with production down the line. And that cascading waste is deadly in a lean environment.
Well, I mean, it's I mean, it maybe not as prevalent now as it used to be, but I mean, it's not unusual for engineers and architects to design stuff that is really hard to build.
Yeah.
It's like it looks great on paper. It looks great when it's
blueprint,
when it's breadboarded or mocked up.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it gets out to production. It's like, oh man, this is a nightmare.
And they weren't involved. The production people weren't involved in that process, so they don't know. And they're looking at the material specs that might be involved in that, or the tolerances, whatever. And they're like, well, I mean, we can do it, I guess, but how much time and money you got, right?
Or purchasing, says, wait a minute, there's only one source for this part you want to use.
Yeah.
What happens if the source dries up and
Right.
this product can't be built? You're going to have multiple sources. I mean, all sorts of stuff like that.
That again, if you don't have a cross-functional view on it,
Right.
you're not going to ever get to. So that's what Bruce is talking about here, and he always has good articles. So that's a good one. Check out that article again below the player page and read up about it. So that's a good article there.